The woods don't lie. Out here, when the sun breaks through the pines and the air tastes like cold stone and pine needles, there's a kind of honesty the city never knew. No horns, no politics, no committee meetings about what shade of beige your house is allowed to be. Just wind, bird song, and the kind of silence that makes you feel like your bones belong to the earth again. That was my life. That was my promise to myself when I bought this land. My name's Jack Turner. After 20 years in the Army and another 5 drifting between jobs that paid the bills but starved the soul, I found myself on the edge of Placer County with 20 acres of hills and stubborn granite. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Mine in a way the world couldn't argue with. Deed signed, notarized, stamped by the county clerk. A man's piece of dirt, earned the hard way. Most mornings out here, my routine was simple. Check the water line that ran from the spring head. Trim back the brush that crept like green fire across the south fence. Put up a few trail cameras for the deer, just to remind myself I wasn't the only heartbeat living in these woods. And sometimes, when the mood struck, I'd shoulder my old Remington shotgun and go looking for wild turkey along the ridge. Not hunting for meat so much as hunting for peace. That morning should have been no different. A Tuesday, cool and bright. Coffee still warming my chest. Shotgun resting easy in the crook of my arm. I was halfway down the ridge path, thinking about whether I should patch the shed roof before the next rain, when I heard it, metal on rock, a hollow clang, then another, then the sharp thud of a hammer driving steel into soil. I froze. Out here, sounds travel strange. An axe bite can echo like a gunshot. But this wasn't firewood or fence repair. This was deliberate, measured, like someone laying claim. I slipped through the trees until the clearing opened up, and that's when I saw them. 3 men in bright orange vests and yellow hard hats, tripods bristling with scopes and sensors like insect legs stabbing at the sky. One of them was bent over, driving a silver stake into the earth. My earth. Another had a theodolite leveled straight toward the bluff where my cabin sat like a bullseye. They were less than 70 yards from my front porch. My first thought was county maintenance, utility check, maybe some road crew that got their lines crossed. But then I looked again. They weren't fixing anything. They were mapping, measuring, planting. Like pioneers on stolen land, something cold dropped into my gut. I gripped the shotgun tighter and started downhill, boots crunching dry grass, each step louder than the last. They didn't hear me at first, too busy lining up their scopes, too sure of themselves. But when I finally let my voice rip across the clearing, they all jerked their heads at once. "Hey!" I barked. No wave, no smile, just one word carrying 20 years of command across the air. The tallest of the 3, mid-50s, bald on top with a clipboard tucked against his chest, looked up at me like I was the trespasser. He didn't blink, didn't flinch, just squinted in the morning light, sizing me up. Behind him, the youngest one shifted nervously, like a kid caught smoking in the school bathroom. The third man kept his eyes down on the equipment, jaw tight, pretending this was just another Tuesday on the clock. But me, I knew better. They weren't supposed to be here, and they damn well knew it. I came down that hill like a storm front, shotgun hanging loose in my grip, but high enough they could see the steel. The clipboard man finally raised a hand as if he was the sheriff of this clearing. "Morning," he said, calm and oily. "We've got a work order from Ridge Valley Summit HOA, survey project, right-of-way easement planning." That word, easement, hit me like a slap. "On whose authority?" I snapped, stepping between him and the expensive tripod. He tapped his tablet, chin tilted like he was teaching me something. "The HOA's authority. This stretches within a disputed corridor zone. You should have been notified." I laughed, short, ugly. "You're about 60 yards into private land, pal. My land. There's nothing disputed about it." The young one shifted again, nervous eyes flicking from my shotgun to the clipboard. "We're just doing our job, sir." We were given maps. "Yeah? From who? The Tooth Fairy?" I felt the air tighten. Years of patrols in foreign dirt had taught me the moment before escalation. My thumb brushed the safety on the shotgun, not to switch it, but to remind them, and myself, it was there. "I'm calling the sheriff," I said, loud enough for all 3. I pulled out my phone and hit dial. "Placer County Sheriff's Department," the dispatcher answered. "This is Jack Turner. I've got unauthorized surveyors on my property. They're staking land, making measurements without permission. I want them removed. The dispatcher asked for my coordinates. I gave them precise GPS, logged, filed, notarized with my deed last year. By the time I ended the call, the clearing was a chessboard of silence. Clipboard man, Rick, I'd learn later, smirked like he'd been through this before. "This is going to escalate unnecessarily," he warned. "It already has," I said. "You're standing on a felony." He lifted his tablet toward me. The map glowed, slick and professional. A red perimeter stretched across my hillside, eating into the bluff like a spreading fungus. My cabin sat inside a dotted line labeled Community Development Zone. I didn't touch the screen. Didn't need to. "That map's not worth the pixels it's printed on." Rick's lips twitched. "We were told to expect resistance." "Not resistance," I said, arms folded, jaw tight. "Just law." Before he could answer, the distant whine of engines reached us. Patrol SUVs climbing the gravel road. Lights spinning, but no sirens. I didn't take my eyes off Rick. "You should pack up." He didn't move, neither did his men. Fine by me. The first cruiser crested the bend, dust curling around it. Then another pulled in behind. Two deputies stepped out, mirrored sunglasses flashing. One older, broad shoulders, buzz cut, jaw set like granite. The other younger, still trying to look like this wasn't his first rodeo. I raised my hand, calm, steady. "That's them," I said, nodding to the surveyors. "They're on private land." Mine, no notice, no permission. Clipboard Rick took 2 confident steps forward. "Deputies, thank you for coming. We're working on behalf of Ridge Valley Summit HOA. This area is part of an active boundary dispute and future easement development. We have documentation." "Hold up," the older deputy said, voice low, chewing invisible gum. "One at a time. What's your name?" "Rick Coleman, licensed contractor, dispatched to begin preliminary survey measurements for road access and fiber conduit." The deputy turned to me. "And you're Turner?" "Yeah, and this land's mine. Every inch from the ridge to the tree line. Bought it clean. Never under HOA jurisdiction. These guys are trespassing." The younger deputy pulled out a notepad. "Do you have proof?" "More than enough." I handed over a sealed envelope from my field bag. Inside, notarized land deed, GPS boundary map, county recording, stamped official, drone survey images from last year, even a laminated page with my parcel ID separate from Ridge Valley's. While they flipped through, Rick swiped at his tablet and shoved it toward the younger deputy. "Here's our map. Updated parcel visualization. Shows the HOA's revised perimeter." The deputy squinted. "This reflects Ridge Valley's planned integration of adjacent zones." "Planned integration doesn't rewrite title law," I cut in. The older deputy muttered, "Not unless you're God." Rick's jaw tightened. "We were told this would be sorted administratively after surveying. There's an ongoing review." "They didn't review anything," I snapped. "They just redrew a line and hoped no one noticed." The 2 deputies exchanged a glance. The younger one shifted uncomfortably. "Well, this does seem murky." "It's not murky," I said, stepping closer, voice sharp. "You've got my deed. You've got GPS coordinates. You've got footage. No easement, no consent. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's an encroachment." Silence stretched, then the older deputy handed the tablet back. "You said you're licensed, right?" "Yes," Rick answered. "You also know you're not supposed to work on disputed land without formal notice to the current landholder, correct?" Rick hesitated. "Our orders came directly from the HOA board." "Great," the deputy said. "Then maybe Ridge Valley can pay your legal fees. Because I'm telling you right now, you're leaving this property. And if you come back without a court order or sheriff's escort, it'll be criminal trespass." The 2 younger men began packing their gear, quick and stiff. Rick lingered, jaw clenched, eyes locked on me. "This is going to delay the entire project," he said. "Maybe you should have knocked on my damn door first," I replied. They carried their equipment back to the truck. But, before Rick climbed in, he leaned close enough for only me to hear. "You're not going to win this, pal. They've already scheduled the install. You're in the way." I met his stare, shotgun slung over my shoulder now. I've stood in places where men tried to scare me with worse than paperwork. I'm still here? His jaw worked, but no words came. He got in the truck, slammed the door, and rolled out behind the surveyors. The deputies watched them disappear into the bend. The younger one finally exhaled. Well, that was something. Welcome to Ridge Valley, I said, dry, where HOA means harass our adjacent. The older deputy gave me a long look. This is going to be a mess. You got a lawyer? I will by tonight. Good. If they try again, call your attorney first. But if they step foot here again without cause, you've got the right to press charges. When they left, I was alone with the stake still jutting from my soil. I kicked one loose with my boot. It popped free with a snap, one down, too many left. And the war, I knew, had just begun. That night, I couldn't sleep. The stakes were gone, yanked out of the dirt and tossed behind the shed. But the feeling remained, like I was standing on a landmine and someone was circling with a lighter. Rick's words replayed over and over in my head. You're not going to win this, pal. They've already scheduled the install. That wasn't bluster. That was confidence. The kind of confidence that comes from knowing someone higher up has already signed the paperwork, already greased the right palms, already decided the outcome before the fight even started. So I did what I always do when I can't sleep. I went to work. The south corner of my cabin doubles as an office, if you can call it that. 2 oversized monitors mounted on barnwood, a coffee machine older than most deputies in this county, and enough hard drives to back up every piece of proof a man could ever need. I opened a fresh folder and labeled it in bold red, Ridge Valley Encroachment Evidence Log. First stop, the county GIS portal. I know my way around maps. Hell, I've lived off them in places where one wrong ridgeline meant you walked into an ambush. So, when the parcel maps loaded, I already knew what I was looking for. There it was, my property clear as daylight, parcel ID stamped and separated cleanly from Ridge Valley Summit. No overlaps, no shared boundaries, nothing. Then I clicked a secondary layer I hadn't seen before. Proposed expansion overlay. It shimmered onto the map like a ghost. A translucent boundary line pushing south, curving right into my ridge, right where those bastards had planted their stakes. My gut clenched. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't rogue surveyors wandering too far. This was written into a plan, published, logged, and floating quietly in the county system for 3 months. I downloaded the file, checked the metadata. Author, Hartman Consulting and Mapping Solutions. The name hit me like cold water. I'd seen it on Rick's tablet when he shoved that PDF under my nose. Hartman. Whoever he wasn't just backing the HOA, he was the architect. So I dug deeper. His website popped up, polished and sterile, like a corporate recruiter's dream. Phrases like integrated boundary redefinition, geocivic fusion modeling, and parcel optimization strategy. Corporate nonsense, strung together to sound legal and inevitable. Then I found the section that made my blood boil, community challenges. A glossy write-up on resistance behaviors among rural property owners and strategies to pacify dissent during HOA integration. Pacify dissent. Like folks defending their own land were just insurgents to be managed. Scrolling further, I hit gold, or poison, depending on how you look at it. A YouTube link. The channel was full of videos titled California Boundary Law Explained, and there he was, Dr. Stephen Hartman himself. Salt and pepper hair, thick glasses, standing in front of a whiteboard with the calm assurance of a man who thought he was smarter than everyone else. One video stopped me cold. Placer County Ridge Conflict Case Study. I clicked. There it was. My ridge, my damn hill. With digital graphics sliding across the screen, red dotted lines inching down toward my cabin. Labeled neatly, Development Access Corridor. Hartman stood beside it like a TED Talk professor. Legacy parcels, he explained, often create inefficiencies in utility planning. By integrating these parcels into nearby associations, we promote equity, access, and civic good. I leaned back in my chair, fists clenched. They weren't just planning to take my land. They were already telling the world it was practically theirs. 10,000 views on the video, comments full of HOA members cheering, asking when integration would begin. Someone even wrote, "Can't wait to finally get fiber." That hill's just sitting there. That hill. My hill. I called the one man I trusted at the county, Dan Miller, deputy clerk. We served together before he swapped fatigues for a tie. He owed me more than one favor. "Dan," I said when he picked up, "you ever heard of Hartman Consulting?" Silence, a long one, then a low mutter. "Jesus, Jack." "Yeah, I've seen weird filings with that name, maps that show up before anyone signs off, pre-approvals no one remembers. Approving I need eyes on Ridge Valley, fast." He sighed. "You're asking me to stick my neck out. I'm asking you to stop a theft in progress." An hour later, my inbox pinged, scanned documents. Ridge Valley's application to the pre-zone future infrastructure corridors. Not stamped, not approved, but submitted, logged, circulated. And there it was, my parcel, marked for fiber optic route and emergency access gate, phase 2. I scrolled further and found a draft flyer. My name, my land, wrapped in flowery language about community enhancement and strategic addition to the neighborhood's future. Pending confirmation. Pending, which meant not legal yet. They were gambling, counting on me being slow or blind or too damn tired to notice. Counting on momentum and fake legitimacy to carry them past the finish line before I could say a word. But they made a mistake. I noticed. And I wasn't tired. I clipped every screenshot, stamped every PDF, logged every timestamp, labeled a new folder, Hartman Fraud. This wasn't just a land dispute anymore. This was war by PowerPoint, and I'd fought wars before. The next morning, the woods didn't sound the same. The birds still sang, the creek still murmured, but underneath it all was a hum, my own nerves vibrating like barbed wire. I brewed coffee strong enough to peel paint and tried to shake it off. But the stakes were still in my head, the red lines on Hartman's map, Rick's smug warning. Around 10 o'clock, the mail came. The envelope looked official, county seal, Department of Environmental Services. I figured it was a follow-up to the call I'd made to the sheriff, or maybe a form acknowledging my land complaint. I slid it open, skimmed the first line, and felt the world tilt. It was a complaint, allegedly filed by me. According to the document, Jack Turner had submitted a statement declaring I intended to cut off water access to the community, restrict easement rights, and erect fencing to limit communal trespass. Communal trespass. Words I'd never in my life put together. At the bottom was my signature. Not mine, not exactly, but close enough to fool someone in a hurry. I recognized the swoop of the J, the clipped loop of the T. It had been lifted from my fire insurance forms last year. A forged letter, planted in the system to paint me as hostile. My phone was in my hand before I knew it. I called the listed contact number. A clerk answered, polite but distracted. "Yes, Mr. Turner, we were surprised by your tone. Usually residents don't come across so aggressive. It's flagged for review, not processed yet." My teeth ground together. "That's because it's not mine. It's a forgery." Well, you may want to take it up formally." I hung up and called Dan. "I need a trace." Somebody filed a fake complaint under my name. They used my signature, Dan. My damn signature. He groaned. "Jack, we're not NSA, but I'll see what I can do." 2 hours later, he called back. Came from a relay IP, registered downtown. Where downtown? Ridge Valley HOA office. Bingo. By the time dusk fell, I had a new folder on my desktop. Digital impersonation. Screenshots of the fake letter, email headers, overlays comparing my real signature to the forged one. Every pixel logged and tagged. I thought I was braced for anything. I wasn't ready for the email that hit at 5 o'clock. No sender name, just an address that looked stitched together by a machine. Subject line, "You don't know how far this goes." Inside, a single .zip file. Normally I'd delete it, but paranoia won. I opened it on a sandboxed drive, 6 screenshots, internal HOA emails. The headers checked out, ridgevalleysummit.org, dated the past month. The words made my stomach turn. From Karen Whitfield, HOA president. Turner is isolated. No firm, no representation. Hartman's modeling is already public. If he protests, we label him hostile and bury him in filings. Another email. Push corridor classification before county review. Once public work orders go out, rollback is impossible without cause. And the worst, if he reacts publicly, escalate. Target his communications. He's ex-military. Play the instability angle if needed. So, that was the plan. Paint me as the crazy vet on the hill. Break me with paperwork, smear me with rumors, bury me under process until I couldn't breathe. I'd seen this game before. Iraq, Afghanistan, places where enemies didn't shoot first. They eroded you with propaganda, with whispers and forged papers, until even your allies doubted you. Well, I wasn't going to let some HOA president run counterinsurgency on my land. I worked through the night, hammering together a slide deck. Yeah, a damn PowerPoint. Evidence on one side, forgery proof on the other. Folder after folder, each labeled like ammunition. Fraud operations. Digital impersonation. Hartman fraud. By dawn, I had enough to start a war. Monday morning, I drove into Auburn and filed a complaint in Superior Court. Unauthorized land use, digital impersonation, fraudulent cartography, conspiracy to defraud a property owner. I attached everything: maps, server traces, screenshots, Hartman's YouTube video, with my ridge plastered on it. The clerk raised her eyebrows at the stack. "This is substantial." "Yeah," I said, "and airtight." 2 days later, my phone rang. County prosecutor on the line. He wanted to meet. "You've built a hell of a case," he told me, flipping through my binder. "If even half of this holds, Ridge Valley's in serious trouble." "Half's just the warm-up," I said. By Wednesday, a judge signed a writ of discovery. The sheriff's office rolled on the HOA admin building, a sleek glass box with a shiny new parking lot built like a bunker. When I pulled up, it looked like an anthill someone had kicked open. Boxes stacked on the curb, deputies hauling out laptops, USB drives sealed in plastic bags, clerks logging evidence with rubber gloves. The HOA's property manager stood off to the side, gray-faced, staring at his shoes like they'd just caved in his world. But Karen Whitfield wasn't there. "Vacation," the receptionist said weakly. Sure, it didn't matter, because what they had already found was enough to burn the whole thing down. Dan sent me the first leaked memo 2 days later. Subject line: Turner Parcel Integration, Aggressive Track. Release Hartman's study. Stage a soft entry survey. If met with resistance, use digital leverage to isolate the owner. Digital leverage. Like I was just another checkbox in some damn flowchart. My jaw locked as I read the words again. They weren't improvising. They'd planned this step by step. And now, thanks to the sheriff's raid, every step was coming to light. But I knew one thing the memos hadn't said: what predators do when they're cornered, and Karen Whitfield wasn't cornered yet. The raid should have been the end of it. Deputies hauling out boxes, memos surfacing with my name in black and white. Any sane board would have folded right there. But sanity wasn't part of Ridge Valley's charter. That night, the woods felt different. Still. Too still. No breeze through the pines, no owls. Just silence thick enough to hear my own pulse. I locked the cabin door, checked the shotgun by the window, and told myself I was being paranoid. Then the motion sensor pinged. The feed lit up my monitor, a shadow slipping along the edge of the south fence. Not Rick. Too slim, too quick. No tools in hand, just a phone raised like they were taking pictures. I threw on boots and stormed out with the Remington. By the time I hit the fence line, the shadow was gone, vanished into the tree line. But they'd left something behind, a fresh stake, hammered clean into the dirt, silver head gleaming in my flashlight, not county issued, not survey grade, just a cheap piece of rebar, driven deep, like a message. I yanked it out, snapped it over my knee, and tossed the shards into the brush. The next morning, my inbox chimed with a fresh insult. A local blog post, anonymous but linked back to Ridge Valley's community updates. The headline: Hostile landowner threatens HOA safety. My name wasn't printed, but the details were obvious. Ex-military recluse. Hostile behavior toward licensed contractors. Threats with firearms! They were building the narrative, just like the memos had said. Paint me unstable, dangerous, a veteran about to snap. I called Dan. "They're escalating," He sighed. Yeah, I've seen the chatter. They're pushing it to county supervisors, whisper campaign style, trying to make you look like the problem I paced the cabin, phone tight in my grip. So they raid their own office, get caught forging complaints, and still spin it like I'm the threat? Jack, Dan said carefully. Karen's smart. She knows public perception buys time. If she frames you as dangerous, the county slows down. Nobody wants to be seen siding with the crazy vet until the dust clears. I looked at the cameras, the ridge, the fence line. Dust isn't going to clear, Dan. Not until she's out of the picture. That night, it got worse. Around midnight, I woke to a faint crackle outside. Not branches, not animals, electronics. I crept to the window and scanned the yard. A black SUV idled by the gate. Engine off. Lights out. Just sitting there. I grabbed the shotgun and stepped onto the porch. The cold hit me like a slap, breath fogging white. Hey! I shouted. No movement, no response. I racked the shotgun, let the sound echo. The SUV's headlights flared, engine roared, and it peeled away, gravel spraying like shrapnel. I stood in the dust long after it was gone, pulse hammering, knowing what that visit meant. They were testing me. By dawn, I'd hardened the perimeter, extra trail cams, infrared floodlights, backup batteries in case they tried to cut power. On the south gate, I hung a new sign in bold red, private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted, armed owner on site. Not subtle. But then, neither was I. The war had shifted. It wasn't just paperwork and maps anymore. It was shadows in the trees, whispers in blogs, SUVs in the night. Karen Whitfield wanted me rattled, wanted me to make a mistake she could spin into proof. But I'd spent half my life being hunted. And if she wanted a fight in the dark, she'd chosen the wrong man. 2 weeks after the raid, the courthouse in Auburn felt more like a theater than a hall of justice. Every bench was filled. HOA members whispering like they were at Sunday service. A couple of local reporters with notepads ready. Even a law professor from Sacramento, I'd later learn, sitting in the back row, curious about how far this rabbit hole went. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my binder thick enough to choke a horse. Next to me, a county prosecutor who'd taken a personal interest after seeing the forged complaint in my name. Across the aisle, there she was, Karen Whitfield. Pearl necklace, beige blazer, hair pulled back like she was heading a church bake sale, not standing accused of fraud. Her face radiated calm, but her hands, clasped tight on the table, betrayed the pressure. Next to her sat her lawyer, stiff suit, tie so sharp you could slice paper with it, and behind them, head ducked low, was Hartman himself. Gone was the YouTube confidence, the TED Talk professor vibe. In person, he looked like a man who wanted to melt into his oversized blazer. The judge, a woman with steel gray hair and 30 years on the bench, opened with a gavel crack that echoed through the room. Mr. Turner, she said, you've brought serious accusations. Land fraud, forgery, conspiracy. Let's hear your case. The prosecutor nodded at me. I stood, walked to the projector, and let the first slide glow across the wall. Your Honor, my name is Jack Turner. I own Parcel 184-117. The HOA has no jurisdiction over it. None. But 3 weeks ago, they sent surveyors onto my land without notice. They claimed authority they don't have, using falsified maps. Click. The drone footage appeared, surveyors hammering stakes, their tripods pointed at my cabin, deputies in the frame, telling them to pack up. Click. The county plat map, parcel highlighted in clean lines. This is the official record, stamped, sealed, notarized. Then I dropped the hammer, click, the expansion overlay. Red lines bleeding across my ridge, Hartman's logo in the corner. Your Honor, this map does not exist in any legal registry. It was uploaded as a conceptual overlay, then paraded as if it were law. Karen's lawyer jumped up. Objection! These were community proposals, not binding legal actions. The judge didn't even look at him. Sit down. Mr. Turner, continue, click. Hartman's YouTube video filled the screen, my ridge plastered across it, dotted lines crawling toward my cabin. Hartman gesturing like a salesman. The prosecutor's voice cut through. Dr. Hartman, is that you? Hartman shifted, his glasses fogging. Yes, but these were interpretive models, educational in nature. Educational? The prosecutor's tone sharpened. Because it looks like a sales pitch for land you didn't own. The judge leaned forward. Did you know the parcel was privately owned when you filmed this? Hartman swallowed. I may have misinterpreted the boundary status at the time. Click. The email on screen now. Karen's words. Will present your model as credible public evidence. The courtroom buzzed like a hive. Karen's lawyer tried to rise again, but the prosecutor was faster. Your Honor, this wasn't misinterpretation. This was coordination. The HOA took Hartman's speculative map and presented it as real, while simultaneously filing forged complaints under my client's name. Click. Side-by-side images of my genuine signature and the forgery. Metadata pointing back to the HOA office. The judge's brow furrowed. In 25 years on this bench, she said slowly, I have never seen an HOA orchestrate forgery, impersonation, and fabricated mapping at this scale. Karen's mask cracked for the first time, a twitch in her jaw, a flash in her eyes. The prosecutor pressed on. Emails show intent to smear Mr. Turner as unstable. They discuss targeting his communications, labeling him hostile, using his military background against him. This is not neighborly disagreement. This is calculated fraud. The judge turned to Karen. Do you have anything to say? Karen rose smoothly, her smile porcelain as ever. Your Honor, with respect, this has all been taken out of context. We were exploring possibilities for community improvement. Perhaps our methods were clumsy, but the intent was civic good. I regret if Mr. Turner felt... Save it, the judge snapped. Intent doesn't excuse forgery. The gavel came down hard enough to make people jump. Effective immediately, Ridge Valley HOA is fined $250,000. Miss Whitfield, you are remanded into custody pending charges of land fraud, conspiracy, and digital forgery. Dr. Hartman, your license will be reviewed by the state board. Bailiffs. The room erupted, reporters scribbling, HOA members gasping, Karen's lawyer sputtering about due process as deputies cuffed her wrists. She turned once, eyes finding mine across the aisle. No words, just a promise etched into her glare. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. When the gavel cracked down, I thought I'd feel relief, vindication, maybe even triumph. But standing there, watching deputies cuff Karen Whitfield and haul her out of the courtroom, all I felt was a cold weight in my gut. She didn't shout, didn't protest, just stared at me with eyes like sharpened glass, as if she already had the next move planned. By the time I got back to the cabin, word had already spread. The Placer County Record had my name in a headline. HOA president charged in landmark land fraud case. The article quoted me briefly, something about protecting what's yours. But the part that stuck wasn't what I said. It was the comments. Guys unhinged. No HOA would risk forgery for one Ridge ex-military type. Watch for a meltdown. Karen was framed. He's the one escalating. The smear machine hadn't stopped. It just shifted into higher gear. That night, the SUV came back. Different one this time. Parked at the bend in the road, headlights off, engine idling. I didn't bother going outside, just sat in the dark with the Remington across my lap and the monitors glowing. At 12:37 a.m., the vehicle rolled off, gravel crunching like a slow drum beat. By dawn, I was done playing defense. I reinforced the gate with new chain, cross-braced the posts with steel, hung signs every 50 feet. Private property. Trespassers prosecuted. Installed 2 more cameras, 1 thermal, 1 motion-triggered floodlight. Paranoid? Maybe. But paranoia keeps you breathing. 3 days later, Dan called. Jack, he said, voice low, you need to hear this. We've been combing the seized HOA files. Whitfield wasn't freelancing. I gripped the phone tighter. Go on. There are emails, chains that go beyond Ridge Valley. Hartman was on contract with at least 3 other HOAs in the county. Same playbook. Expansion overlays, forged complaints, coordinated narratives about unstable landowners blocking civic improvement. My chest tightened. So, this wasn't just about me. No, You were just the first one to fight back. I leaned against the porch post, staring out at the ridge. The pines swayed gently, innocent as children. But I knew better. Somewhere out there, more landowners were probably getting the same treatment, same forged letters, same whisper campaigns. How far does it go? I asked. Dan hesitated. We don't know yet. But there's talk Hartman's group is tied to developers, fiber optics, utility easements, maybe even real estate trusts looking to flip parcels once the owners are forced out. Forced out. Like I was just a name on a spreadsheet. That night, I sat at my desk, pulling every file I'd gathered into a master drive. Evidence logs, screenshots, the fake complaint, Karen's memos, Hartman's videos. I labeled the folder, War Chest, because I knew one thing. If Ridge Valley went down, others would step up. And the next time, they wouldn't send surveyors first. The pressure came faster than I expected. A letter, this one genuine, from a law firm in Sacramento. Cease and desist. Alleging I'd defamed the HOA and harassed licensed contractors with threats of violence. They wanted me to retract my claims. I laughed bitterly, tossed the letter on the pile, and poured another coffee. Let them come. I'd stack their lies as high as they wanted. But somewhere inside, I felt it. The grind. Not of fear, but of erosion. They weren't aiming to beat me in a firefight. They wanted me buried under so much paper, so many whispers, that I'd cave just to breathe again. That night, the cabin felt smaller, the woods darker, every sound outside sharpened to a needle. I checked the monitors twice before bed, then lay awake staring at the ceiling. Karen's glare still burned in my head. That look wasn't defeat. It was warning. And I knew it in my bones. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The first strike didn't come through the courts or the county offices. It came through the trees. 3 nights after the cease and desist letter, the dogs started barking. Not the usual sharp yaps at a raccoon or coyote. This was full-throated warning, the kind of sound that makes your blood run cold. I grabbed the Remington and checked the monitors. South fence, near the creek line, movement. 2 figures crouched low, flashlights hooded with red filters. Not kids, not hikers. They were moving with purpose. I slipped out the back door, boots crunching on gravel, shotgun loose in my hands. The air was sharp, pine needles dripping from a late drizzle. I circled wide, staying in the shadows until I caught sight of them again. One had bolt cutters, the other carried a small case, surveyor's kit by the look of it. They weren't there to steal, they were there to mark. I stepped out of the dark and let the action rack of the Remington thunder through the trees. Drop it! The taller one froze. The other spun, flashlight beam jerking across the pines. Easy, the tall one said, voice strained. We're contractors. Just checking lines. Contractors don't cut fences at midnight, I said. The smaller one panicked first, dropped the case and bolted into the woods. Branches snapped, flashlight beam bobbing like a firefly before vanishing. The tall one stood his ground, bolt cutters dangling useless in his grip. Look, he stammered. We were told this was HOA land. Just a job. Don't shoot. Who sent you? He hesitated. Too long? Hartman Consulting. Subcontracted. That's all I know. I kept the barrel steady on him. You've got 10 seconds to start walking toward the gate. He did, hands raised, stumbling in the dark. When he reached the gravel, he broke into a jog and disappeared down the road. I picked up the case he'd dropped. Inside, fresh stakes, spray paint, and a laminated map. My land, redlined again. But this map had something new. A mark labeled Emergency Access Gate, Phase 2. They weren't just redrawing lines, they were preparing to build. By dawn, I'd added the case to my evidence log. But a sick feeling settled in my gut. Because if Hartman's network was bold enough to send men with bolt cutters, they weren't afraid of the law. Later that morning, Dan called. Jack, I don't know how you're still standing, he said without preamble. The files we're digging through. This is bigger than Karen. Hartman's tied to a consortium out of Sacramento. Shell companies, development funds. They're positioning HOAS as fronts for land grabs. I pinched the bridge of my nose, and they thought I'd roll over and be their test case. Exactly. They underestimated you, but now you're a problem, and problems get Handled. I told him about the men with bolt cutters. The map labeled Phase 2. Dan went silent for a long moment. Jack, you need to be careful. This isn't just legal pressure anymore. If they sent people once, they'll send them again. I knew he was right. That night I strung tripwire alarms along the fence line and loaded the 12 gauge with fresh shells. My wife used to say I slept like a soldier, light, ears tuned to every creak and snap. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Around 2 a.m., the tripwire went off. A flare hissed into the sky, lighting the ridge in blood-red glow. I lunged to the monitor, two shapes sprinting from the east fence, retreating fast, caught in the flare's glow like insects scattering from light. I didn't chase, not this time. Instead, I sat at the desk and started drafting my next move. Evidence was one thing, survival was another. And now I had proof, hard proof, that the Ridge Valley fight wasn't over, that Hartman's network was willing to trespass, sabotage, maybe worse. The county might see this as a zoning dispute, but I knew better. This was a war, and the front line was my ridge. I'd spent the better part of a week waiting for the next move. The surveyors, the forged letter, the smear campaign, all of it pointed to one thing. They weren't done with me. So I stopped waiting. I started hunting. I rigged the south fence line with more than cameras. Motion sensors fed into a tripwire connected to a flare launcher. Silent alarms pinged my phone if someone so much as brushed a pine needle. And on the ridge above the creek, I dug in a blind with a clear view of the trail. If Hartman's men wanted to come back, they were going to walk into my net. It was just past midnight when the first ping hit. South fence, movement, then another 30 yards deeper. Slow, careful, not kids, professionals. I slid into position, Remington braced, night scope glowing faint green. Two figures crept along the fence. One carried bolt cutters, the other a crowbar. Both had black hoodies, masks pulled low. The first bent to the chain link. That's when the tripwire popped. A flare streaked skyward, hissing fire across the ridge. The men froze in the red light like animals caught in a snare. "Drop it," I barked. One ran, the other didn't. Instead, he swung the cutters, snapping at the fence like he could muscle his way through before I got there. I fired a warning shot into the dirt 3 feet from his boots. The blast cracked through the night, echoing off the pines. He dropped the cutters. Hands flew up. "Jesus, don't shoot! Don't—" "On your knees." He hesitated. I stepped closer, barrel steady, eyes locked. "Now." He went down hard, knees crunching gravel. Up close I could see he was younger than I expected. Mid-30s maybe. Cheap gloves, tactical boots that had seen better days. Not HOA board material, hired muscle. "Who sent you?" I asked. He kept his mouth shut. I jammed the barrel closer. "You're on my land, cutting my fence at 2 a.m. One more lie and you'll be crawling back without kneecaps." His breath stuttered. "Hartman." I already knew. I wanted more. Full name, Stephen Hartman. Hartman Consulting. "And what's the job?" He swallowed. "Phase 2, install. Fiber prep. We're supposed to soften the ground, make it look like it was already in use. Then when the county signs off, nobody questions it." I felt the anger boil in my chest. "So you fake the history, forge the paper, plant the stakes, and by the time I catch you, the map says it's already done." He nodded miserably. "That's the game. Who else is playing?" Another hesitation. I pulled the hammer back with a sharp click. "Developers?" he blurted. "A trust. Sacramento-based. HOA fronts the paperwork, Hartman does the maps, and guys like me handle the dirty work. If somebody resists, we push until they break." "Push how?" He looked down. "Smear them. Drain them, or—" He trailed off. "Or what?" He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. I zip-tied his wrists with the kit I'd stashed in my vest and marched him to the gate. At the gravel road, I shoved him into the dirt and dialed the sheriff. When the deputies showed, they recognized me. One raised an eyebrow at the bound man. "Found him cutting my fence," I said flatly. "Says he works for Hartman. Might want to check his story." The younger deputy looked uneasy. "We'll take him in, but you know how this goes. Without a formal charge." "Charge him with trespassing," I snapped. and tell the prosecutor to add conspiracy. He admitted Phase 2's already in motion. They cuffed him and hauled him into the cruiser. As the taillights vanished down the road, I stood alone in the dust, shotguns slung, heart pounding. I should have felt victory. Instead, I felt the same cold weight from the courtroom, because if Hartman had hired men like that, masked, armed with cutters and crowbars, it meant this was no longer about surveys or easements. It was enforcement. And enforcement only comes when the stakes are bigger than one man's ridge. I went back inside, poured a shot of whiskey, and stared at the map he'd dropped in the dirt. Red lines, utility corridors, a bold stamp at the bottom. Sacramento Development Trust. Hartman wasn't the brain. He was just the mouthpiece. The real enemy had deeper pockets. And they weren't going to stop until my land, or me, was out of the way. The man I caught with the bolt cutters didn't last long in county lockup. By the next morning, he was out on bail, his name scrubbed from the booking log like he'd never been there. Dan called me before I'd even had coffee. "Jack," he said grimly, "the guy you turned in?" Records vanished. Someone high up leaned on the sheriff's office. Hard. "He's gone." My gut twisted. "You're saying he's back out there?" "Worse. You poke the trust. And they don't like being seen." I'd heard the name before, in whispers, in footnotes on filings Dan had sent me. But now it was real. Sacramento Development Trust. 3 bland words that sounded like a retirement fund, but had the weight of a private army behind it. I needed proof, more than maps, more than rumors, something undeniable. So I started digging. Days turned into a blur of coffee and blue light as I combed through corporate filings, shell companies, and obscure zoning requests. It was all there if you knew where to look. Hartman's consulting fees funneled through LLCS that only existed on paper. Parcels marked disputed reappearing months later under trust subsidiaries. Landowners bought out cheap or buried under lawsuits until they sold. And Ridge Valley? My land was just one square in a much bigger chessboard. The trust wasn't after pines and creeks. They were after corridors, fiber optic lines, utility routes, emergency access gates, infrastructure, which meant money, billions eventually. And I was standing in the way of one of their pieces. The first warning came on a Wednesday. A plain envelope in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. "Leave the ridge, Jack. Accidents happen in the woods. No signature. Just block letters printed and cut from a cheap laser printer." I burned it in the fire pit, then installed 2 more cameras on the driveway. The second warning wasn't so subtle. Thursday night, I woke to the smell of smoke. I rushed outside, heart hammering, shotgun in hand. The shed by the south fence, my tool shed, was on fire. Flames licking the walls, smoke curling into the night sky. I managed to douse it with the pump hose, coughing, eyes burning, while the dogs howled. But the message was clear. They could reach me any time they wanted. By morning, the shed was a blackened husk. My tools ruined. Dan drove up that afternoon, pale and tense. He walked the perimeter with me, staring at the cameras, the ashes, the signs. "You can't stay like this," he said. "They'll wear you down, piece by piece. Fire, smear, sabotage. Eventually you'll snap, or they'll make it look like you did." "I'm not leaving," I growled. "I know," he said softly, "which means we need to flip the board." That night, we pored over files at my kitchen table. Dan had pulled fresh documents from the county archive, a series of pre-approval memos stamped with Hartman's logo, but filed under a trust shell company. They weren't just planning expansions, they were already selling future easements to telecom firms, betting on the land before it was even theirs. And one document chilled me to the bone. A draft agreement offering exclusive corridor rights through Trias Ridge, my ridge, to a contractor I'd never heard of. It was signed, dated, pending only community integration confirmation. They had already sold what wasn't theirs. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. So this was never about Karen's HOA. She was just the puppet. Dan nodded. Ann Hartman's the voice. But the trust? They're the hand pulling the strings. I leaned back, exhausted but burning inside. Then we cut the hand. "How?" Dan asked. I tapped the stack of files. We don't just fight them in court. We take this public. Reporters, law professors. Hell, the state board already hates HOAs. We make this case bigger than Placer County, bigger than me. Dan's eyes narrowed. That makes you a target. I smirked bitterly. I already am. That night, I uploaded everything, the war chest, to 3 encrypted cloud drives, sent links to Dan, to a contact in the prosecutor's office, and to a friend I trusted in the state capitol. Then I sat on the porch, shotgun across my lap, listening to the woods. The ridge was quiet again. Too quiet. But the fight wasn't over. It had just shifted from pine needles and chain links to boardrooms and headlines. And if the trust thought they could scare me off my land with fire and shadows, they hadn't learned a damn thing. Because I'd lived through worse wars. And this one was personal. The morning after I sent the war chest out, the ridge felt different, lighter somehow. Like the woods themselves knew I'd stopped hiding. But with that relief came a sharper edge of danger. If the trust knew I was about to make their scheme public, they wouldn't just send lawyers and fake complaints anymore. They'd send something worse. By sundown, I had my answer. The dog started growling before the alarms tripped. A low, guttural sound, ears flat, hackles raised. Then came the soft ping on my phone. North fence. Breach detected. I grabbed the Remington, threw on the vest, and killed the cabin lights. The monitors glowed in the dark. 3 figures this time, not 2. Moving fast, coordinated. Night vision goggles glinting faintly in the infrared. Not surveyors, not hired drunks. Professionals. I slid out the back door, sticking to the shadows, every step measured. My traps had been set days ago, crude but effective. Tripwires, noisemakers, a few shallow pits covered in brush. The first intruder hit a snare line. A flare whooshed skyward, hissing red light over the ridge. He dove to the ground, rolling, weapon drawn. A suppressed pistol. Suppressors. My chest tightened. This wasn't vandalism. This was a hit. I belly crawled through the brush to the blind, heart pounding, and raised the scope. The second intruder was covering the first, scanning with a carbine. The third moved wide, circling toward the cabin. They weren't here to scare me. They were here to finish me. I exhaled slow, centered the crosshairs, and squeezed. The blast tore through the night, buckshot shredding the dirt a foot from the man's boots. He spun, firing blindly, muzzle flashes strobing. The others shouted, voices sharp, clipped, military cadence. Contact right! The fight was on. I fired again, this time low, into the brush, forcing them down. The woods erupted in chaos, flares hissing, dogs barking like hellfire, alarms blaring. One intruder stumbled into a pit, legs snapping with a crack I could hear even from the blind. His scream split the night, raw and panicked. The others tried to drag him free, shouting curses. But I was already moving. I ghosted downhill, staying low, closing the distance. When I broke cover, the Remington leveled square at their backs. "Drop it!" I roared. The healthy one froze. The wounded one groaned, clutching his leg. The third, the one with the pistol, turned halfway, eyes wide behind the goggles. "You don't want to do this," he rasped. "You picked the wrong ridge," I said. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the pistol clattered to the dirt. The carbine followed. I marched them down to the gate, shotgun never wavering. My breath came ragged, the weight of the night pressing down like stone. "Who sent you?" I demanded. No answer. I kicked the wounded man's leg. He howled, teeth bared in pain. "Who?" The one with the carbine finally spoke. "Sacramento Development Trust, contracted through Hartman. We were told you'd fold, that you were isolated. And if I didn't?" His silence was answer enough. I zip-tied their wrists with shaking hands, every nerve buzzing, then called the sheriff with a voice that barely sounded like mine. When the deputies arrived, their eyes widened at the sight. 3 men bound, weapons on the ground, one screaming with a broken leg. I gave my statement flat and cold. They crossed my fence. Armed, suppressors, military cadence. They weren't here to talk. The older deputy looked at me long, jaw tight. "You just stirred up a hornet's nest, Turner." "Then I'll burn the nest," I said. They hauled the men off, bagged the weapons, cataloged the gear. But I knew how this would go. By morning, they'd vanish from the log just like the first one. And I knew then, this wasn't just about my land anymore. This was about showing the trust that some of us don't break. As the cruisers rolled away, I stood alone at the gate, shotgun heavy in my hands. The woods around me were quiet again, but it wasn't the peace of before. It was the quiet of a battlefield, just before the next charge. I thought I'd seen the worst of it. Fake maps, forged complaints, smear campaigns, men with cutters, men with guns. But the night I put 3 of the trust contractors on the ground, something shifted. For the first time, they'd failed in the open. And failure makes predators sloppy. By dawn, the news had already leaked. Someone from the sheriff's office had tipped a reporter. The headline blared across the Placer County Record, "Armed men linked to HOA scandal arrested on private ridge." Suddenly, it wasn't just my ridge anymore. It was a story. By noon, 2 satellite trucks were parked on the gravel road. Reporters with perfect hair leaned against my gate, microphones ready. I didn't give them a statement, not yet. But the cameras did their work anyway. By the weekend, the war chest was everywhere. My friend in the Capitol had pushed it to state officials. The professor who'd written me that letter put the files in his property law seminar. And a reporter from Sacramento blew the doors wide open with a special investigation. The Trust Network. How? HOAS, consultants and developers, colluded to steal California land. They had it all: emails, forged overlays, the fake complaint with my signature, even clips from Hartman's own YouTube lectures, where my ridge glowed red on his maps. And with the public watching, the Trust couldn't hide anymore. The first to fall was Karen Whitfield. She'd already been charged, but now the state real estate board slapped her with lifetime bans and civil suits that would drain her retirement twice over. She sold her house within a week, slipped out of Oak Creek like a thief in daylight. Hartman went next. Licensing review revoked, consulting business blacklisted. The man who once strutted in front of whiteboards with a smug professor's smile now looked like a ghost dragged into court. But the big one was the Trust. State investigators raided their Sacramento offices, walking out with boxes of files and hard drives. On the news, I saw suits and handcuffs, heads down, shuffling past cameras. One headline said, "Federal fraud charges were pending." I sat on my porch and watched it all unfold on a small battery-powered TV, shotgun leaning against the rail. For once, the ridge felt quiet in the right way again. But victory didn't feel like triumph, because even as the Trust burned, I knew the machine was bigger than a few names on paper. Shell companies collapse, new ones appear, consultants rebrand. HOAS find fresh presidents with clean smiles and sharp knives. The fight wasn't over. Not really. That truth hit home a week later, when a black sedan rolled slow past my gate. Not county deputies, not neighbors, tinted glass, unmarked plates. They didn't stop, just slowed enough for me to catch the silhouette of a man in the back seat, watching. Then they rolled on, swallowed by the bend in the gravel road. I didn't chase. I just stood there, hand resting on the Remington until the dust settled. Later that night, Dan came up with a bottle of bourbon. We sat by the fire pit, flames snapping, dogs curled at our feet. "You did it," he said. "Took down an entire HOA scam, exposed a network. You realize people are calling this the Ridge Valley case? Law schools are teaching it already." I sipped slow, smoke curling into the stars. "It's not over, Dan." Not by a long shot. He gave me a look. "You think they'll try again?" I glanced toward the dark tree line, where the woods whispered in the wind. "I don't think. I know, they lost a battle, but wars like this, they don't end. They just change fronts." For a long time, we sat in silence. The woods hummed with crickets, the creek whispered somewhere in the dark, and the air smelled of pine and ash. Then Dan raised his glass. "To the ridge," he said. "To the ridge," I echoed. The fire cracked, the stars burned steady. And for one rare moment, the promise of the woods returned. But even then, deep inside, I kept the weight of vigilance close. Because I'd learned something out here, something no HOA or trust boardroom would ever understand. A man who knows his land, his maps, his boundaries, he can't be bought, he can't be bullied, and he sure as hell can't be erased with a forged PDF. Out here, on this ridge, the line held. And as long as I'm breathing, it always will.